Hello YouTube, Goddard Radio Mosky here again with another beer review for you, as is usual. Now we're going to have a look at one of my local breweries here in Heidelberg. As I've mentioned in previous videos, we've got 4 breweries in Heidelberg. One of them, of course, is debatable about whether it's actually in Heidelberg or not. That's the Brauerei Klosterhof, which is actually from Ziegelhausen. Debatable as to whether that's a district of Heidelberg or a separate village. We have the Heidelberger Brauerei, which is the big brewery, brews beer, and it goes all over the nation of Germany. Of course, it's quite, I think that's a huge capacity they have there. But in the Altstadt, the old town in Heidelberg, we have 2 different brew pubs. We have Vetter and we also have Kulturbrauerei Heidelberg, and it's one of their beers that we're going to have a little look at today. This is the Scheffel's Porter, this one, and I've not actually tried this guy before, but I've heard that it's very, very good, and I previously reviewed for you their Bock beer, the Winterbock, so I'll put the link to that in the video description, and I'll also put the link to the brewery website, of course, so you can check those out if you are interested, and hopefully you are. But I'll just take you through a brief history of this brewery again, as I always like to do. But as I always say, if you are simply just interested in the tasting of this beer, then feel free to go on towards the latter part of the video and you will catch that particular segment. Now, as I mentioned, this is one of the 2 small breweries in Heidelberg, located at the eastern end of Hauptstrasse on a street called Leiergasse. You'll notice this guy because you'll see a little building with a statue sitting out in the top. I think it's a knight that the statue is, of course. But the building in which this brewery is located has quite a bit of history behind it. It was referred to as the Wirtschaftshof, and it actually used to supply the castle with all their necessary goods back until the year 1235. Of course, if you know Heidelberg at all, there's a really beautiful castle just sitting up on the hill there. But there isn't actually a mention of when brewing started in the Kulturbrauerei, but the Schaff family brewed their beer here for several generations during the 18th and 19th century. And the building also used to be a malt house for the Zum Zepfel Tavern, among many others in the city. But they actually have their brew pub, which is a really beautiful old building with some of the really nice sort of typical hardwood long pew tables, if you like, that you would associate with Oktoberfest and, you know, traditional Germany, if you like. And the brewery also serves some traditional food, which is quite typical of some of these brew pubs in Germany, and you can get tours of the brewery as well. And the head brewer, Jürgen, very lovely man and very willing to talk about his beer. I went and did one of the brewery tours there, and they also have a hotel in which you can stay, and it has very, very good ratings, so I highly recommend you check it out if you are staying in Heidelberg. And of course, it is in the heart of the old town as well, just below the castle. But since 2011, they've actually owned the Zum Zepfel Tavern that I mentioned a little minute ago, and it's one of the very popular student pubs in the city. And apparently this building has been a restaurant since the 17th century. In the older days, it used to have its own brewery, but as I mentioned, very popular among students. Of course, Heidelberg is the oldest university in Germany. I believe 1384 was the year that it was founded, and that's where I'm doing my master's research at the moment. But the brewery is a completely modern facility, and it has state-of-the-art equipment, and they use a mix of German, American and New Zealand hops. And apparently the attraction to the New Zealand hops is the fact that there's no natural competitors in New Zealand for the hops, and so they grow very, very well. And all their German hops actually come from the Tettnanger or Hallertau regions in Germany, very famous for their hop productions actually. And they use hop pellets rather than the full flower hops, and Jürgen said that this was due to the fact that it's easier to extract the flavour from, and they work better in the process apparently as well. So they really like using these particular hop pellets, if you like. And we got to try one of these. You can bite into it and it goes all fluffy and gets really, really bitter. It's quite a cool thing to do, in fact. But all of their beers are unpasteurised and unfiltered, and this gives them a more natural and fresher flavour, which I would agree with. This is what Jürgen said. And of course, all their beer is brewed in accordance with the Reinheitsgebot of 1516, originally applying to Bavaria, but I believe it became all throughout Germany when Germany unified, and it was also sort of applied in some of the other states, I believe, before the unification of Germany, of course. But just to tell you a little bit about the other beers that this brewery do, I have the list here. You can get a Fastenbock, the Dunkel, the Frühlingsbier, the Hefeweizen. They've got a Hefeweizen Dunkel, a Krausen, which is a sort of Dortmunder Helles style beer, Herbstfest beer, the sort of Autumn Fest beer, if you like to translate that. They have their Keller beer, the Maibock, the Pils, the Porter, and the Weihnachtsbock, of course. And that's the one I reviewed for you before, and the link to that video is in the description there. And also check out the brewery website if you are interested. But let's just take you through the review of this guy now. This one is a 5.8% porter. It has caramel's in it, Munich malts. There's a couple of other ones here that it has listed, which is the Menge roast malts. I'm guessing just roast malts there. Bierseinsate, I think Schwarzfarbe, it's just black malts, roasted malts in there. It's think the hops here on this one, Hallertau, Doesn't say there's New Zealand hops, and it is of course brewed in accordance with the Reinheitsgebot, as I mentioned ago. So we're going to have a look at the 5.8% porter, but let's get this guy out and get on with the tasting. I actually have to do this guy immediately because if you can see here, if I press down on this or pull up on it, it wasn't sealed properly, so I need to do this guy immediately. So it's a very, very fresh beer, but let's get this guy open and get on with the tasting here. See, no pop at all, so they didn't seal this properly at all, which is a little bit disappointed about, but let's get it out and get on with the tasting here. Pouring quite aggressively actually. I'll get a nice head on this guy. There we are. As you can see, a very, very dark sort of ruby coloured beer here, this one. Yeah, definitely a sort of mahogany ruby beer. It's got a nice tan head on it, just a finger and a half I would say. Very, very fluffy. You can see there is quite a small amount of bubbles just popping up to the top there. Maybe that's a result of it not being sort of sealed properly, if you like. I would have expected more bubbles from it, but this happens, I guess. But definitely a really nice red ruby mahogany beer there. I think you can see it quite well on the camera there when I look at it. The head is just starting to dissipate a little bit, but let's give this guy a smell and see how we get on. It actually smells very, it actually smells a little bit grassy, this one, on the first thing, which is what I expected. But you can pick, when you breathe it in a bit deeper, you're getting the coffee malts that you would expect from a porter. The dark coffee and roasted malts, and there's a nice little bit of caramel just in the background of that. The coffee bit is a little bit sharp, but there is surprisingly just a little bit of grassy character to this as you smell it. But definitely a nice underlying coffee and caramel aroma. Just a little bit of fruit, I would think, as well. Just a little hint of sort of red and dark fruits in there. As you can see, the head is just sort of subsiding there, but definitely quite a sweet smelling one with a little bit of grassy character in there, but there is that underlying sort of roasted caramel and coffee malts in there. Really attractive smelling beer, but let's give it a taste and see how we get on. First thing I'm noticing with it, very smooth, and that's one thing that's typical of the Kulturbrauerei Heidelberg. All their beers are very smooth. The Helles has a little bit more of a sharpness to it, but all of their dark beers that I've had so far have all been very, very smooth beer. But yeah, very, very smooth. The carbonation is very light. And in terms of the taste though, it's actually, you're getting quite a bit of sharpness from the coffee malt in this one. The caramel is actually coming out on it quite well, which is the interesting thing. You're starting off and you're getting a nice little bit of caramel which comes out, and it's sort of it's not a very dark caramel, it's quite a bright caramel in this, and this is the most prominent thing, with a little bit, maybe it has a little bit of bready character to it as well, but there is the underlying darkness of the coffee, and that's coming in just towards the end of the opening malts, if you like. But yeah, it's definitely a sort of sweet caramel to a sort of light caramel rather than a roasted and dark caramel. You are picking up the roasted character, but it's more in with the coffee, if you like. And I would say, in terms of the aftertaste, you're getting just a little bit of fruit there, but it's the coffee flavour that is lying through this beer and coming out. When you take it in on the tongue, in fact, you're getting just a little hint of the red and dark fruits there, but then the malt base comes out quickly. You get that nice sweet caramel, then the coffee sharpness kicks in, and then it sort of subsides a little bit, and you're just getting this a little bit of fruity character in after that. Is, in a way, it's quite similar to the bock, but in feel, if you like, but the caramel is coming out a little bit more, and you're getting, the fruit isn't as sharp in this as it is in the bock. But yeah, this one definitely a very, very smooth beer in terms of the mouthfeel. Very, very smooth, which is even typical on the tap, actually, I'm sure, with this one. My friend tried it with me and said it was very, very smooth. But it's sort of an oily mouthfeel to this one, I would say. Definitely kind of Definitely not such a refreshing beer, if you like. This one is more of a tasting and sipping beer for enjoying the dark beers, and that's what I've said in a number of my videos about the dark beers. They're more sippers than they are sort of just sessionable beers, and I quite like having that every so often. I really like dark beers and just having one that you can sip, and this one is definitely like that, but it's got an oily mouthfeel. I would probably describe this as mid to full bodied, if you like. It's a bit lighter than the Weihnachtsbock that I reviewed for you before, and it is very, very smooth, but it's definitely a sipping beer rather than a sessionable beer. And as I mentioned with this guy, it has a really nice sort of sweet caramel malt base with a sort of little underlying red and dark berry fruit, if you like. It even has just a little hint of grassy character to it, I would say, on this one. The aftertaste, in my opinion, definitely on the top front of the tongue, you're getting a nice little bit of sort of reddish fruits, just a little bit of grassy character in there, and you've got the caramel and coffee flavours just underlying in there, and that sits in the aftertaste with this one as well. But overall, this is an interesting porter. It's not a style I've actually been acquainted with finding in Germany, a porter beer. I'm more inclined to be finding the sort of Schwarz beers, if you like. I've encountered these a number of times, so hopefully you can give this guy a try. As I say, it's quite unique to find a porter beer in Germany, so give the Scheffel, the Kulturbrauerei Heidelberg, have a look at their Scheffel's beer if you're in the area. A really, really nice set of beer. I'll review the Helles and the Hefeweizen for you at a later date, and of course they're my bock when it appears, because I'll still be here when that comes. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. If you have given this guy a try, please let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on it. As I say, quite interesting with this one. I'm a bit disappointed that I had to do it immediately because the seal wasn't right on it. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Thanks again for your support over my videos, and I'll catch you soon with another one. Cheers.